Okay, so I'm gonna just talk about like real quick Cliff Notes type, really fast overview on some symbols and just kind of reading patterns to understand a little bit better. So like I said, this won't be a full-on tutorial. It's just as I'm doing this, I thought some of the arrows on this particular pattern, which I was working on Simplicity 1109, I thought it would be a really great example to explain patterns if you're very new to sewing. Just some brief thoughts and notes about pattern reading. I've taught quite a few classes on people who don't know, that have never sewn, or they haven't sewn in years, or they're very, very young and they're excited about sewing, but the concept might be a little bit too much to grasp at that age level. There are different kinds of patterns, you know, like New Looks, very easy. There's some other very simple, there's some, I forgot what company it was. I think it might be McCall's. It's like So Easy or something like that. I don't remember, but there was one that was like, it was like a jumpsuit I was helping someone make, and it was very easy sewing pattern, as so it said, but to the student I was teaching, she was too young to understand and grasp some of these things. So just keep in mind, you know, if some patterns, even though it says so easy, very for beginners, novice, sometimes still, if you are not aware of what symbols and things mean, you won't be able to grasp the instructions of the patterns and the instructions to sew at the same time, and then you'll just get frustrated and you'll put your project away and you'll never finish it, and then you get discouraged from sewing. So I want to try and prevent that. So I'm going to go over here in a little bit and I'm going to show you how to translate some of the symbols. I probably won't go over all of them because this is just a very simple skirt, so it doesn't have like every single symbol in the world, but it's enough to get you by if you're learning how to sew. Another thing I wanted to mention, before you start any project, definitely pre-wash your fabrics. Now this, I'll kind of skip over on like chiffons and silks because you really don't want to run silk in your washing machine like ever. You want to get that dry cleaned, professionally cleaned, or even they sell like dry clean kits in the aisle of detergents and stuff at your local store. And I forgot the name of that, which there's like a dry cleaning kit, and you wash it in your dryer basically. But definitely want to pre-wash everything, especially with cottons and things like that. They have a really bad tendency to shrink, and the worst thing would be is what would happen to me a lot when I was in high school and I would make my pants. I would never pre-wash my pants, and I would make really, really cool pants to wear to school, and I would wear them once and then I'd wash them, and then they would shrink so much they would become like high waters on me when they weren't when I first finished them. So it's very important that you get all that shrinkage out of the way. Usually when I buy fabric, I'll buy like maybe a quarter to half a yard more and wash that first just to get all the shrinkage out. Because again, if you buy the exact amount of fabric and you pre-wash it, it's gonna shrink, and then when you go to lay out all your patterns, it might not, all the pieces might not fit on the fabric anymore, even though you follow the directions on the back of this. So definitely pre-wash first. And then also, you know, do take time. Don't get too excited where you want to skip the most important parts. You know, read the back, get your measurements, as I'll be explaining later. Sometimes you fall in between measurements, like you'll have the hips of a size 10, but you'll have the waist of a size 8 on the chart. So really understand measurements and measure yourself, and you can grade the pattern, which is what it's called, grading the pattern, to make it fit your body, to customize it. And then also, once you figure out what size you are, take time to read this, find out how much yardage you need, plus that quarter or half a yard more to make up for the shrinkage. Now, I don't know the science behind how much something will shrink in terms of that. I just find that either a quarter or half a yard more usually is enough to compensate for how much it's going to end up shrinking, and then you can, of course, press your fabric afterwards. Definitely always want to press your fabric before you lay your patterns on it, because once you lay your pattern on it and then you go and press it later, it might enlarge a little bit, and then things kind of don't end up fitting when you go to sew pieces together. So always make it a good habit, pre-wash, iron. Even if your pattern's a little wrinkly and folded, Iron that too. I do that so that way my pattern is the exact size it is, because again, if you have wrinkles, they're kind of sitting up a little bit all over the place, and that'll kind of shrink the pattern a little bit. So you don't want to cut your pieces out in the wrong size. So again, pre-wash, iron. Also on the back of the pattern, if you read the envelope, you know, it gives you suggestions in what fabrics to use, and it'll tell you. Also, it'll tell you the notions, which is like your sewing accessories, you know what I mean? Like your decorative stuff, your thread, your zippers, your buttons, snaps, hook and eyes, things like that that you'll also need in order to complete your garment. So yeah, so let me go ahead and explain some of these symbols. Hopefully it helps you a little bit. Now right now I'm doing a skirt for a friend for her daughter. They're going to Comic-Con, and I was looking at this and I thought some of the arrows for like the grain line, like how they want you to lay it, was kind of interesting. And maybe you've come across a pattern with similar, which I will show you right now, and you know, maybe it just confused you. You're like, what the heck is this? And I'll explain why, you know, in kind of layman's terms. I don't want to get too technical because I feel like if I start throwing fancy lingo around, I don't want to make it seem like I'm talking down to somebody, and that's just not my teaching style. I try and keep it in layman's terms so that way at least you understand why the rules and why this is the way it is. So anyway, so I have my, what is this, the back laid out. By the way, if you end up buying the 1109 Simplicity pattern, and you're gonna do like a size 16, you're definitely gonna need 2¼ yards for that. But sorry, that's completely off topic. But anyways, so I'm doing the back, and then I also laid out my yokes, which is my center back, and the yoke front, which is this one. So let me point out a few things with this. Now, with all patterns that you cut out, you have to pay attention. Sometimes there's multiple, let's say there's multiple back pieces, and you'll cut them all out, and then you'll cut all the fabric, and you're like, what the hell am I doing with this extra square? Always pay attention what it is. Let's say you're doing photo B. In this case, I'm doing A, which is this one. But this one covers B, A, B, and C. If you open up the full pattern, there's going to be another back piece which only covers D, E, and F. So please pay attention to that. And that goes for all other pieces. Maybe the yoke sometimes in some patterns, but for the most part, the yoke, like it says here, it covers A, B, C, D, E, and F. So also pay attention. Center back seam. That's the butt crack. That's going to be where you put your zipper. I haven't looked at the instructions yet, but this notch right here more than likely indicates where the zipper is going to end. Because remember, when you cut this out, the end of the zipper is going to be about there, but then your yoke extends up here when you cut out the waistband, which is called the yoke. Selvages, grain lines, and all that stuff. If you see on patterns, these arrows represent how they want you to lay the pattern in regards to the weaving and all that stuff on the fabric. So whenever you see your selvage, this here is the selvage. See this? Whoops. No, you can't see it because I'm not even pointing at it. This part here, this white part, that's all faded, and then you'll see like the little holes, the perforations. That's the selvage. So basically when you see your arrows, you want to have the arrow parallel to the selvage. You do not want to have this turned at all unless the arrow is kind of like sort of crooked, but you need to turn the whole pattern to create that parallel assignment of where it is. So yeah, and then also it tells you on all pattern pieces how many to cut. When I do like gowns and stuff, it'll say cut 2 of fabric, cut 2 of interfacing, cut 2 of lining, things like that. Another thing here too, which is what I wanted to mainly do this video about because I remember having these issues when I was learning how to sew. So on this yoke, you will see the arrow for view D, E, and F going this way. And for view A, B, C, which is what I'm doing, the arrow is going this way. So I needed to turn this arrow to be parallel to my selvage. So notice how the yoke is kind of turned a certain way. If I was doing the other skirts, then I would flip this, you know, right side up, and this would end up being parallel to that. But because I'm doing view A, I had to kind of rotate this slightly to make this end up being parallel, which this is kind of going to be on the bias. It is going to, in some part, be on the bias, but you want that with a waistband because you want some kind of give for your waistband. That's why they do it. Another symbol that you might see is this one, which it says here center fold. Whenever you see arrows that look like this, that means that you need to fold your fabric like I have here, and you need to place it on the fold, because when you open it up, this is going to be one continuous piece. So this is for the front. So for the front, for this look, they didn't want a seam shown. See how there's no seam here? You know, in some designs there can be, but in this particular case, if you're following the pattern, that's continuous. That's why they go ahead and they cut it like that. Also, another thing, like here it says 5/8 hem allowed for skirt, 3/8 hem allowed for overlay in B, because if you look here for B, there's like an overlay that goes on top of this, which is what this is. So it's like a netting or some kind of tool. But always measure yourself first. Don't just say, oh, I'm a size 7, and then look on this where size 7 is and be like, okay, I need that much yardage, or I'm going to follow all the directions just for a size 7, because sizing changes with patterns just like they're different with brands when you go buy clothes at the store. So always, measure how long you want the skirt, because if you do it this way, when you wear it, the skirt might be too long for you, or it might be way too short for you if you're a very tall person. So always don't just assume that it's going to be the correct length for you. You still need to kind of custom tweak it or grade the pattern, as they call it, to fit you better. Because again, it's not going to be, oh, I'm always a size 7. It might be too long for you, or it might be too wide for you. Like, you need to measure yourself, make sure that the length is good, make sure that what they correspond, like if you're a size 8, let's say here, that your waist is 24 and your hip is 33, measure yourself, because you might fall in between an 8 and a 10, or like an 11 for the hip, but a 10 for the waist, or your, And don't be offended either if your waist is like 28 and all this, and it's calling you a 14. Like, don't be offended and say, oh no, I'm going to be a size 8 because that's what I am in clothes. It won't fit you. So just follow the pattern. I know, sometimes we get stubborn on those type of things, but those are just some symbols that I wanted to kind of explain on the pattern as I'm doing this, because I thought it was a really good example. And as you'll see, let me show you for the front piece on here. I have it cut. As you'll notice here on the front piece, this one again is on the center fold. And then always don't forget your seam allowances. I did a 1/2 inch seam allowance up here and down here. Of course, for here I added an inch because this is a little bit too small for what my friend gave me her daughter's measurement, so I had to kind of enlarge it a little bit. But I did do my 1/2 inch on all of it, mark it, cut it out, and then, just sew. Enjoy your pattern that you bought. But I hope these tips were helpful. If you have any further questions, or maybe something that I didn't touch on because it didn't end up being on this pattern, leave me a message below. Whatever, I'm open to open criticism or just comments. All right. Thank you guys so much. Have a great day. Bye.